The Anzac Day clash between Collingwood and Essendon is upon us, so I thought what better way to celebrate the game and what it means to the nation by paying homage to some of the elite performances that we've seen over the course of the 20 years since that medal has been inaugurated into the game. First up, just a very honourable mention for Sav Rocker. He got awarded the medal in retrospect in 1995. Obviously, the medal came in 2000, so the AFL looked back at the Sav's performance in 1995 for Collingwood and awarded him that medal in retrospect, kicking 9 goals in a drawn game, which was the very first Anzac Day game that the AFL world had seen. It's also, still to this day, the second highest attendance for an Anzac Day game behind 2023. And interestingly enough, that game had a higher attendance than the grand final from the previous year. So that was pretty cool. The other honourable mention before we get stuck into the top 5 goes to Mark McGough. The 17-year-old without a driver's licence had to get picked up by Anthony Rocker before the game to get to the Anzac Day game. He collected 25 disposals in a 33-point win where the game was played in treacherous weather conditions. Mark McGough went on to play 49 AFL games. Without further ado, let's get stuck into the top 5, beginning with number 5 being Jack Ginnivan in his 2022 Anzac Day performance, kicking 5 goals at just 19 years of age, having only played 10 games up until that point in his career. It was also amidst a bit of backlash that Ginnivan was receiving from general AFL media. He had posted up with a GoPro after the round 1 win that year, and obviously, and a lot of journos and experts didn't like that look in the game. Nevertheless, Ginnivan comes out in a very big game against Essendon, kicks his 5 goals, I think it was 13 disposals, and Collingwood ended up winning by 11 points, kicking extremely straight. I think they went 15 goals and 3 behinds, and we actually lost pretty much every other stat, but the stat that matters is obviously the score at the end of the day. Jack Ginnivan's Anzac Day performance followed suit for the rest of the year, accruing 40 goals for his tally, and that was Fly McRae's first year as coach at the Collingwood helm. And what was interesting was Collingwood were 0-3 to start that year, and by that point, when they came up against Essendon, they were 2-3. So very similar. Collingwood were 0-3 this year, went 3-3, and very similar circumstances. And we know Collingwood had a great year, a winning season, falling short against Sydney in that prelim final, losing by 1 point. So a little bit of extra motivation there to suggest that you can start off your season being 0-3 and go deep into the final series like Collingwood did in 2022. Number 4, I've reserved this spot for a young Chris Tarrant, being 20 years old, the only player to ever win the medal in a losing game in the Anzac Day event. Chris Tarrant kicked 5 goals, had 13 disposals against an Essendon side that made it all the way to the grand final against Brisbane that year, losing of course. Big Taz went on to kick 53 goals that season. Being so young, it was actually his second highest goal tally for his career. We know half of his career resided in the back line and then the rest in the forward line, so that's probably why he wasn't able to amass the 53 and 54 in his early season. Collingwood that year in particular hovered around the mid-table for the most part, and they went 2-3 in their final 5 games to leave their 8th position slightly ajar, and Adelaide stole that from Collingwood's clutches late in the year to take that finals position. Number 3, I've elected to go with Dane Swan's performance in 2014, where he kicked 4 goals, 2, collected 26 disposals in a game where Collingwood were down by 30 points in the first quarter. And from that point onwards, Collingwood went on to kick 12 goals to Essendon's 3 for the rest of that game. And the Pies end up winning by 23 points. And what I remember from that game in particular was Dane Swan's left foot floater off the boundary and that great celebration. So love that and have fond memories of that game. From a broader lens that year, Collingwood hovered around the 6th position mark for the most part. And then from round 13 onwards, Collingwood went on to lose 6 of their next 8 games to finish just outside the 8. And on a personal level for Swanee that year, it was arguably his worst performance across the course of the season from a statistics standpoint. He averaged 24.9 disposals, which was his second lowest tally for his whole career, and his lowest being early in his career in 2008. Moving on to number 2, and that spot is reserved for Steel Sidebottom in the 2016 Anzac Day game, where he came into the game extremely sick, pale-faced, vomiting before the game, and he comes out, kicks 3 goals in that first quarter, and ends up with 4 goals, 33 disposals, 30 rating points, which is extraordinary. And by the time the game got to halftime, the game was completely iced. Collingwood had scored 90 to Essendon's 14. Unfortunately for the Pies that year, they did not make the finals. It was sort of like a semi-rebuild before, the rebound that we saw in the years that preceded after that. Collingwood at that point had the fourth youngest team in the league. Finally, arguably the greatest Anzac Day performance that we have seen since its inauguration, Dane Swan in 2012. He collected 44 disposals, 20 contested possessions, 3 goals, 31.7 ranking points for the game, and he was too fat. And the icing on the cake being that Collingwood won that close nail-biter with Jared Blair kicking that famous toe poke goal late in the game. In 2012, Pies had a great season, finishing top 4. However, they couldn't get over that bogey hurdle in Hawthorn. We lost 3 times against them, twice in a home and away season, and then in that qualifying final, we got spanked against Hawthorn. And then we beat West Coast in the semi-finals and had to travel to Sydney, to verse Sydney, and lost the prelim. And that was the end of Collingwood's season. And I think in that year, Dane Swan finished 3rd in a Brownlow tally behind a tied equal winners between Trent Cotchin and Sam Mitchell, where there was a bit of controversy. I think that was where Jobe Watson was stripped of his medal during that whole drug saga. So that was unfortunate. As far as overall Anzac Day medal tallies are concerned, we have James Hird and Scott Pendlebury currently sitting on 3 medals in those games, and then Dane Swan with 2. Can Pendles maybe get 1 more medal for the road and clutch that first spot on his own? I remember his 2019 performance where he collected 38 disposals in that extremely close game, and it would be remiss of me not to mention where Bucks came in and stood up for Pendlebury in that post-game speech when he was awarded his medal, and Essendon were booing for whatever reason that it may have been, and Bucks came out and said, shame on anyone for booing a champion. So that was one of the highlights that sticks in my mind when it comes to key, moments / speeches. And of course, how could you not forget Darcy Moore's speech after last year's win? That was probably the most elaborate and well thought out speech that I've ever seen in an AFL context to this day. So really looking forward to tomorrow's game. May the best team win. Let's hope both teams put on a great fight. Great tackling teams, great pressure teams. So they're going to live up to what the Anzac Day game embodies. Go Pies, and good luck to the Bombers.